The letter arrived on a Tuesday, a day already gray with rain and the particular kind of quiet that follows a sleepless night. I remember the feel of the envelope, thick and creamy, bearing the crest of the mortgage company. My stomach immediately clenched. It was the 10th of the month, which meant the grace period was over. I was 7 days late, and the small savings I had from Mark's life insurance were dwindling faster than sand through a sieve. My daughter Lily was at the kitchen table, humming to herself as she colored a picture of a sun, a defiant splash of yellow in our muted world. For her, I had to be strong. I had to open the letter. I slid my finger under the seal, my breath held tight in my chest, expecting the usual bold, capitalized warning, past due, notice of intent. Instead, my eyes scanned a sentence so foreign, so utterly impossible, that I had to read it 3 times. Dear Ms. Gable, we are writing to confirm that the outstanding principal balance on your mortgage, in the amount of $287,131.52, has been paid in full by a third-party benefactor. Paid in full. The words didn't compute. They were like a line of code from a language I didn't speak. I sank onto the bottom step of the staircase, the letter trembling in my hand. A mistake. It had to be a clerical error, a cruel joke played by the universe. People like me, widows with a 6-year-old daughter and a part-time job at a local library, didn't have benefactors. Our mortgages didn't just vanish. I called the bank, my voice a shaky whisper. The customer service representative was cheerful, her tone grating against my raw nerves. She confirmed it. An anonymous wire transfer had cleared the day before. The house was mine, free and clear. When I hung up, the silence in the house felt different. It was no longer the heavy, oppressive silence of debt and worry, but something lighter, more expansive. I looked at the walls of the home Mark and I had bought together, the faint pencil marks by the doorframe tracking Lily's growth, the scuff mark on the baseboard from her first tricycle ride. It was ours, truly ours. The relief was so profound, it felt like a physical weight lifting from my shoulders. And for the first time in the year since Mark's accident, I cried not from grief, but from a dizzying, disbelieving joy. Lily ran to me, her small arms wrapping around my neck. "Mommy, why are you wet?" she asked, patting my tear-streaked cheek. I hugged her tight, burying my face in her strawberry-scented hair. Happy tears, baby. They're happy tears. For 2 days, I lived in that bubble of impossible happiness. I told no one, afraid that speaking it aloud would shatter the illusion. Who would do such a thing? Mark's parents were gone, and my own parents were living on a fixed income in Florida. We had friends, but none with that kind of money. It was a miracle, a genuine, inexplicable miracle. Then, on Thursday, the doorbell rang. Standing on our porch was Mark's Aunt Eleanor. She was a tall, elegant woman in her late 60s, always dressed in tasteful shades of beige and cream, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. We hadn't seen much of her since the funeral. She lived 2 hours away and had always been a peripheral figure in our lives, someone who sent meticulously chosen, if impersonal, Christmas gifts. She held a wicker basket filled with pastries. "Sarah, my dear," she said, her smile warm but her eyes sharp, analytical. "I was in the area and thought I'd drop by, see how you and my precious grandniece are holding up." I invited her in, my heart thumping with a strange premonition. As I made tea, she wandered through the living room, her fingers trailing over the furniture, her gaze lingering on the photos of Mark and Lily on the mantel. "This is a lovely home," she murmured, more to herself than to me. "A good, solid place for a child to grow up." Mark had excellent taste. We sat at the kitchen table, the pastries untouched between us. She asked about Lily's school, about my job, her questions gentle but probing. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. Finally, she folded her hands, her rings clicking softly against the porcelain of her teacup. "I hope my little gift wasn't too much of a shock," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. The air left my lungs. I stared at her, my mind scrambling to connect the perfectly poised woman before me with the anonymous, godlike benefactor who had saved me. It was you?" I stammered. She gave a self-deprecating wave of her hand. "Oh, it was nothing. Walter, my late husband, was very prudent with his investments. The money was just sitting there, and I couldn't bear the thought of you and that sweet child struggling. Mark would have wanted me to make sure you were secure." I was flooded with a wave of gratitude, so immense it brought fresh tears to my eyes. I tried to thank her, to explain what this meant, but the words felt clumsy, inadequate. She simply patted my hand. "Think nothing of it, dear. We're family. And family takes care of its own." She stayed for another hour, chatting amiably, but I noticed a shift. Her eyes kept drifting to Lily, who was now playing on the floor with her dolls. There was an intensity in her gaze, a focused, proprietary hunger that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. When Lily came over to show her a drawing, Eleanor pulled her onto her lap, hugging her a little too tightly, for a little too long. "Such a beautiful girl," she whispered, stroking Lily's hair. "She has Mark's eyes, the spitting image." As she was leaving, she paused at the door and turned to me. Her smile was still in place, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'll be visiting more often now," she said. It wasn't a question. "To help out, to be a proper grandmother figure for Lily. It's the least I can do. After all," she added, her gaze sweeping over, "the house. We need to take care of our investments, don't we?" The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone in the sudden chill of my own hallway. The miraculous gift suddenly felt less like a lifeline and more like a chain, its weight settling around my neck. The house was mine, but I had a terrifying feeling that I was no longer the only one who believed they owned it. Eleanor was true to her word. Her visits, once a yearly occurrence, became a weekly ritual. At first, I told myself my unease was just ingratitude, a cynical response to an act of incredible generosity. I tried to force the feeling down, to welcome her with the open-armed warmth she deserved. She would arrive every Saturday morning, her car laden with gifts, expensive toys for Lily, organic groceries for the pantry, even a new set of designer towels for the bathroom. "The old ones were looking a bit threadbare, dear," she'd say, with a tinkling laugh, as if she weren't pointing out my own financial shortcomings. She was helpful, undeniably so. She'd clean the kitchen while I was at work, leaving it gleaming. She'd do the laundry, folding everything into perfect, crisp squares. But her help felt like an occupation. I'd come home to find she had reorganized my spice rack alphabetically or rearranged the books on my shelves by color. My home was slowly being remade in her image, my own presence in it subtly erased. Her focus always was Lily. She doted on her, lavished her with attention and presence that bordered on the absurd. A life-sized dollhouse that took up a quarter of the living room. a pony riding camp for the summer that cost more than my monthly salary. When I tried to protest, to say it was too much, she would wave her hand dismissively. Nonsense, Sarah. A child like Lily deserves the best. I can give her that. It's no trouble at all. The way she said a child like Lily always bothered me, as if Lily were a rare specimen, a collector's item. The proprietary tone I'd noticed on her first visit became more pronounced. She started referring to Lily's bedroom as our little girl's room, and would talk about future plans, ballet lessons, private school, a trip to Europe, as if my input were a mere formality. One afternoon, I came home early from work to find Eleanor and Lily in the garden. Eleanor was on her knees in the dirt, showing Lily how to plant rose bushes. "These will be our roses, darling," she was saying, her voice a low, hypnotic hum. "Yours and mine. We'll take care of them together, and every summer they will bloom just for us." She didn't see me standing in the doorway. Lily looked up, her face smudged with dirt, and beamed. "Auntie Elle says I have a green thumb, Mommy." I forced a smile, but a cold dread was seeping into my bones. It was the possessive pronoun that did it. Our roses, our little girl. She was slowly, methodically writing me out of the narrative of my own daughter's life. The tension began to build in small, almost imperceptible ways. She would subtly undermine my authority in front of Lily. If I told Lily she couldn't have a cookie before dinner, Eleanor would say, "Oh, let the poor thing have one, Sarah. A little treat won't hurt." If I disciplined Lily for talking back, Eleanor would scoop her into a hug and whisper, "Don't you worry, sweet pea. Grandma Elle isn't cross with you." She had started insisting Lily call her Grandma Elle, a title that felt like a deliberate usurpation. My own mother, Lily's actual grandmother, lived hundreds of miles away and could only visit twice a year. Eleanor was inserting herself into that void, cementing her position. I began to feel like a guest in my own home, a nanny whose services were becoming increasingly redundant. The house, the one she had gifted me, started to feel like her territory. She had a key, which she'd had made for emergencies, and would often let herself in, startling me as I came out of the shower or sat reading in the living room. The sense of security the paid-off mortgage was supposed to provide had evaporated, replaced by a constant, low-grade anxiety. I felt watched, managed, and slowly, suffocatingly controlled. The breaking point for my passive acceptance came one Tuesday evening. Lily had a slight fever, and I had decided to keep her home from school the next day. I was on the phone with the school attendance line when my call waiting beeped. It was Eleanor. "I was just calling to confirm I'll be picking Lily up from school tomorrow," she said brightly. "I thought we'd go for a drive and get ice cream." "Actually, she's not feeling well," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "She has a bit of a fever, so she's staying home." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "A fever? Does she need a doctor? I can be there in 2 hours. I'll bring my doctor. He's much better than those local pediatricians." "Eleanor, no, that's not necessary. It's just a low-grade temperature. She just needs rest." "Sarah," she said, her voice losing its sugary coating and taking on a hard metallic edge. "You are not a medical professional. You can't possibly know what's best. A fever can be a sign of something serious. I am coming over." "You are not," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "I am her mother. I will take care of her. She is fine." The silence that followed was heavy and cold. When she finally spoke, her voice was deceptively soft again, but laced with something venomous. "Of course, dear, you're her mother, for now. Do try to get some of that children's Tylenol into her. The generic brands are so unreliable." She hung up before I could reply. "For now." The two words echoed in my head, a clear and unambiguous threat. This wasn't about generosity. This wasn't about family. This was a campaign. The mortgage wasn't a gift. It was the purchase price. And the item she was trying to acquire was my daughter. That night, after Lily was asleep, I went into Mark's old office, a room I had barely touched since he died. I sat at his desk and opened his laptop. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I had to find something. I had to understand the woman who was systematically dismantling my life. I started with old family emails, searching for her name. Most were bland holiday greetings, but then I found a chain from years ago, before Mark and I were even married. It was between him and his mother. He mentioned that he was bringing me home to meet the family. His mother's reply was warm, but she added a strange line. "Just be prepared for Eleanor. She can be a lot. She always thought of you as the son she never had." The son she never had. I kept digging, going deeper into photo archives, social media profiles of distant cousins, anything that might paint a clearer picture of her. And then I found it. A link to a local newspaper article from over 30 years ago. The headline was small, a minor human interest story. Local couple faces. Heartbreak of infertility. The story was about a support group, and it quoted a young Eleanor, her face tight with a grief that was still palpable through the grainy newsprint. "It's a pain no one can understand," she had said. "To want something so badly, to feel that your life is meaningless without it, and to be told it will never happen. It is a theft of your entire future." The article detailed her and Walter's years of failed treatments, the crushing disappointment, the final devastating diagnosis. She was barren. The word felt archaic, cruel, and in that moment I understood. This wasn't about Mark being the son she never had. It was about Lily. Lily was the daughter she could never have, the future that had been stolen from her. And now she was here to collect. The discovery of that old newspaper article shifted everything. The vague, creeping dread I'd been living with sharpened into a cold, hard certainty. I was no longer just dealing with an overbearing relative. I was facing a woman who had spent a lifetime nursing a profound and gaping wound. A wound she now believed my daughter was destined to heal. Her actions, which had once seemed merely intrusive, now looked calculated, predatory. Every gift, every act of help was a deliberate step in her strategy to replace me. She wasn't trying to be a grandmother. She was auditioning for the role of mother, and she was doing everything in her power to make me fail my own audition. I had to fight back, but I knew a direct confrontation would be a disaster. She held all the cards. She had the money, the veneer of respectability, and she had already woven a narrative for anyone who would listen. The benevolent, wealthy aunt caring for her poor, grieving, and likely unstable niece-in-law. If I suddenly screamed that she was trying to steal my child, I would be the one who looked crazy. She would simply tilt her head with that pitying expression she had perfected and tell everyone how my grief was making me paranoid. No, I had to be smarter than her. I had to play her game. I started documenting everything. I bought a small, spiral-bound notebook and kept it hidden in a box of old tax records. In it, I recorded every visit, every conversation, every undermining comment, every gift. I wrote down dates, times, and exact quotes. May 12th, 10:15 a.m., E arrived unannounced, let herself in, said, "I just wanted to make sure Lily had a proper breakfast. I know how you struggle in the mornings." Implied I can't feed my own child. May 19th, 2:30 p.m., E took Lily shopping for new shoes, threw out the pair I bought last month, said they were bad for her arches. Replaced them with a pair that cost $150. Told Lily, "Grandma L will always buy you the best things, darling. You just have to ask me." The notebook filled with a chilling litany of microaggressions, each one a small, deliberate chisel stroke intended to chip away at the bond between me and my daughter. Reading it over was like watching a slow-motion recording of a home invasion. My next step was to understand my legal position. The house was in my name, free and clear. She couldn't take it away from me. But that wasn't her goal. The house was just the stage she had built for this drama. I spent hours online researching grandparents' rights, custody laws, and the terrifying ways a wealthy, determined person could manipulate the family court system. The stories I read made my blood run cold. They could file for emergency custody based on trumped-up claims of neglect or instability. They could hire expensive lawyers to bury a single mother in paperwork and legal fees she couldn't possibly afford. My poverty, which she had so generously solved, could now be used as a weapon against me. Proof that I had been unable to provide for Lily without her intervention. I realized I needed more than a notebook full of anecdotes. I needed irrefutable proof of her intentions. I used a portion of my meager savings to buy a small, voice-activated audio recorder, no bigger than a flash drive. It felt clandestine and paranoid, something out of a spy movie, but I knew it was my only real defense. I started carrying it in my pocket whenever Eleanor was around, a tiny, silent witness to her campaign. The first time I used it, my hand was shaking so badly, I could barely press the button. Eleanor was in the kitchen, humming as she unpacked yet another bag of gourmet groceries. "I brought some wild-caught salmon for Lily's dinner," she announced. "The omega-3s are so crucial for brain development at her age. The farmed kind is just full of toxins." I took a deep breath. "That's very thoughtful, Eleanor, but we were just going to have pasta." She turned to look at me, her smile unwavering but her eyes cold. "Pasta? Sarah, that's just empty carbohydrates. Surely you want what's best for the child. Her health is paramount. I've taken the liberty of throwing out that boxed macaroni and cheese you had. It's practically poison." The recorder was on. I hoped my pocket wasn't muffling the sound. "I decide what my daughter eats, Eleanor." Her smile tightened. "Of course you do, dear, but a good mother accepts help when it's offered. A good mother puts her child's needs above her own pride." It was a masterclass in manipulation. On the surface, she was a concerned, health-conscious relative, but the subtext was clear. "You are a bad mother. I am a good one." I didn't argue. I just let her make the salmon. I had to let her believe she was winning, that I was weak and malleable. My compliance was my camouflage. While she was busy playing the perfect domestic goddess, I was gathering the ammunition I would need to blow her entire world apart. I started subtly reintroducing Mark into our conversations, watching her reactions. I knew her obsession was tangled up in her feelings about him, the son she never had, now gone forever. "Lily was asking about her dad this morning," I'd say casually. She wanted to know if he liked to play soccer. Eleanor's face would shudder for a brief second. Mark was not particularly athletic, she'd say, her tone clipped. He was a sensitive boy, a dreamer. He needed someone practical to ground him. The implication was that I had not been that person. She spoke of him as if she owned his memory, just as she was trying to own his daughter. Her resentment towards me was a living thing, a toxic undercurrent beneath her placid surface. She believed I hadn't deserved him, and by extension, I didn't deserve his child. The house, his legacy, was now hers, and Lily, his living, breathing legacy, should be hers as well. It was a twisted, terrifying logic, but in her mind it was a form of cosmic justice. One afternoon, she brought over a large, leather-bound photo album. I was clearing out some things and thought Lily should have this, she said. It was filled with pictures of Mark as a baby and a young boy, but every photo had been carefully chosen to feature Eleanor holding baby Mark, Eleanor pushing Mark on a swing, Eleanor at his 5th birthday party, a proprietary arm around his small shoulders. His own mother was conspicuously absent from most of the photos. She was creating a new history, one in which she was the central maternal figure in the family line. As she and Lily turned the pages, Eleanor's voice was a soft, constant narration. Look, there's Grandma Elle giving your daddy his first taste of ice cream. And here we are at the beach. I always made sure he wore his sun hat. She was planting seeds in Lily's mind, creating a mythology of herself as the ultimate caregiver, the true matriarch. I watched them from the kitchen, my hand clutching the small recorder in my pocket, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. This was a battle for my daughter's past as well as her future, and I was terrifyingly, completely on my own. The air in the house grew thicker with unspoken tension each week. It was like living in a home with a slow gas leak. The danger was invisible, odorless, but I could feel it poisoning everything. Eleanor's confidence swelled with my apparent passivity. She saw my quiet compliance not as a strategy, but as surrender. She started making bigger moves, testing the boundaries of her control with increasing audacity. One Saturday, she announced she had enrolled Lily in a prestigious private preschool for the fall. She presented it not as a suggestion, but as a done deal, complete with brochures and a paid registration receipt. Their preparatory program is unparalleled, she said, beaming as if she'd just bestowed another magnificent gift. It will set her on the right path for an Ivy League education. I looked at the receipt. The tuition for a single semester was more than I earned in 6 months. Eleanor, I can't afford this, I said, my voice flat. And we never discussed it. Lily is happy at her public school with her friends. She let out that little tinkling laugh, the one that always set my teeth on edge. Darling, you don't have to afford it. I'm taking care of it. Think of it as an extension of my initial investment in her future. And as for her friends, children are resilient. They make new ones. What's important is providing her with the best possible environment, something stable. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with insinuation. Stable. She was building her case against me, brick by brick. A single, grieving mother, a part-time, low-wage job, a public school. It all painted a picture of instability, of a life that was second best. Her world, the world she wanted for Lily, was one of wealth, privilege, and security. It was a seductive offer, and she knew it. She was counting on the world, and eventually a judge, to see her as the logical, superior choice. Her attempts to alienate Lily from me became more direct. She'd create secret rituals just for the two of them. "This is our special song, isn't it, Sweet Pea?" she'd murmur, humming a tune I'd never heard. "Mommy doesn't know this one." She bought a small locket for Lily, a beautiful gold heart. "Don't show your mother," she whispered, loud enough for me to overhear from the next room. "This is our secret. Inside is a picture of me, so you can always keep your Grandma L close to your heart." I saw the confusion in Lily's eyes. She was 6 years old, caught in a psychological tug-of-war she couldn't possibly understand. She loved the gifts and the attention, but she was fiercely loyal to me. Sometimes, after Eleanor left, she would crawl into my lap and hug me tightly. "Mommy, you're my best girl, right?" she'd ask, her small voice laced with an anxiety that broke my heart. "Always and forever, baby," I'd reassure her, stroking her hair, "no matter what." The veiled threats, once subtle, now carried a sharper edge. During a conversation about summer plans, I mentioned taking Lily to the local public pool. Eleanor scoffed. "A public pool, Sarah? They're breeding grounds for bacteria, and filled with, well, anyone. It's not a safe environment." She paused, her eyes lock in with mine. A child's safety should be a mother's primary concern. A court would certainly see it that way. It was the first time she'd mentioned a court. The word, spoken so casually, was like a gunshot in the quiet room. My blood ran cold. She was telling me, in no uncertain terms, where this was headed. She was no longer just hoping I'd cede control. She was preparing to take it by force. My secret notebook and my audio recorder felt like flimsy weapons against the arsenal she was assembling. I needed something more. I needed her to reveal her endgame, to say the words out loud so that no one could mistake her intentions. I decided I had to set a trap. I had to create a situation where her overconfidence would cause her to drop her guard completely. I chose my moment carefully. It was the 1-year anniversary of Mark's death. I knew Eleanor would see the day as a potent symbol of my fragility and her own strength. I let her see me looking lost, sad, and overwhelmed, which wasn't entirely an act. The grief was still a raw physical presence. I confided in her that I was struggling, that I felt like I was failing Lily. I let my voice tremble. I let tears well in my eyes. I performed the role of the broken widow she so desperately wanted me to be. She took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. Her expression softened into a mask of deep, theatrical sympathy. She put her arm around me, her touch feeling less like a comfort and more like a brand. "Oh, you poor thing," she cooed. "Of course you're struggling. It's been a terrible year. No one would blame you for feeling like you can't cope." She led me to the sofa and sat beside me, holding my hand. The recorder was in my pocket, its tiny red light blinking in the darkness. "You've been so strong, Sarah," she continued, her voice a hypnotic drone. "But you don't have to do it all alone anymore. That's why I'm here. I'm here to help carry the burden." I looked at her, my eyes wide with feigned vulnerability. "But what can I do, Eleanor? I feel so lost." This was it. I was handing her the opening she had been waiting for. Her eyes gleamed with a predatory light. "You can let me help," she said, her voice dropping. "Truly help, not just with money or little errands. Let me provide Lily with the life she deserves. The life Mark would have wanted for her." She squeezed my hand. Sarah, let me take her. Let me raise her. You can visit whenever you want, of course. You can be the fun aunt. But let me be her mother. I can give her everything. A beautiful home, the best schools, travel, security, everything you can't. It's the only logical solution for her. The words were out. The monstrous, unbelievable demand, spoken in a tone of calm, rational benevolence. Let me take her. Let me be her mother. She truly believed it was a reasonable proposition. In her twisted worldview, she was saving Lily from a lesser life and saving me from a burden I was too weak to carry. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure she could hear it. I had it. I had the confession. I just had to get her out of my house without revealing that the meek, broken woman she was talking to, it was a complete fabrication. I pulled my hand away slowly. I need to think about it, I whispered, letting my voice crack. It's a lot to consider. Her face lit up with triumph. She thought she had won. Of course, dear. Take all the time you need, but don't take too long. For Lily's sake. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, the picture of magnanimity. I knew you'd see reason. You're a sensible girl, underneath it all. After she left, I locked the door and leaned against it, my legs trembling. I pulled the recorder from my pocket and stared at it. This tiny piece of plastic and metal held my salvation, but it also held the proof of a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical violation. She hadn't just tried to take my daughter, she had tried to erase me. The battle wasn't over, but now, for the first time, I had a real weapon, and I was ready to use it. The week after Eleanor's chilling proposal was the longest of my life. I existed in a state of hypervigilance, every phone call, every knock at the door, sending a jolt of adrenaline through me. I had the recording, a small, dark jewel of truth. But I knew that possessing it and using it were two different things. A single misstep could ruin everything. Eleanor, believing I was mulling over her offer, gave me space. She sent a few texts, saccharine messages about how she was thinking of me and Lily and praying I'd make the right choice for everyone. Each message was a little twist of the knife. She was so certain of her victory, so confident in my weakness, that she didn't feel the need to press. She thought it was only a matter of time before I handed over my child like a parcel. During that week, I made my plan. I backed up the audio file in 3 separate places: on a cloud drive, on a hidden USB stick, and on my work computer, buried in a folder of library cataloging data. I listened to it once, and only once, just to be sure the quality was clear. Hearing her voice, so calm and reasonable, as she laid out her plot to dismantle my life, made me physically sick. The casual cruelty of it, the absolute conviction that she was entitled to my daughter, was more monstrous than any shouted threat could have been. I knew I couldn't go to the police yet. What was her crime? Making a verbal offer, however monstrous? It was a gray area. I needed her to act. I needed her to cross a line from which there was no return. So I decided to force her hand. I had to reject her offer, and I had to do it in a way that would provoke her into escalating. On Friday afternoon, I called her. My hands were sweating, and I had a page of notes in front of me, though I knew my voice would probably shake too much to read them. "Eleanor," I began, trying to sound hesitant, sorrowful, "I've thought about what you said." And her voice was eager, expectant. "I appreciate the offer, I really do. And I know it comes from a place of love for Lily, but I can't do it. I can't give her up. I'm her mother." I let the finality of the statement hang in the air. The silence on the other end of the line was immediate and absolute, a sudden vacuum of sound. The warmth in her tone vanished, replaced by an Arctic chill. "I see," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You've made a very foolish, very selfish decision, Sarah." "It's not selfish to want to raise my own child," I said, my voice gaining a little strength. "She needs me. She needs stability." Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. The mask was slipping. "She needs a life I can provide. You are choosing to condemn her to a life of struggle and mediocrity because of your own pathetic pride. You would rather see her have less, just so you can keep her for yourself. That is the definition of selfish." "I am her mother," I repeated, the simple biological fact my only shield. "That is a biological fact, not a qualification," she spat. "You have no idea what's coming, Sarah. You think you've won this little battle, but you have just started a war you cannot possibly win. I will not stand by and watch Mark's daughter be raised in poverty by a woman who is clearly not up to the task. I will do whatever it takes to save her from you." She hung up. The line went dead, but the threat lingered in the air like toxic smoke. "I will do whatever it takes." She had declared war. Now I just had to wait for the first attack. It came sooner than I expected. The very next morning, a Saturday, 2 people appeared on my doorstep. A man in a cheap suit and a woman with a severe haircut and a clipboard. They were from the county's Child Protective Services. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. "We've received an anonymous report," the woman said, her eyes scanning me with open suspicion. "A report expressing concern for the welfare of a minor, Lily Gable." They came inside. They looked through my kitchen, checked the food in my refrigerator. They asked me questions about my job, my income, my mental state since my husband's death. They were polite, professional, but their presence was a violation. Every question was a thinly veiled accusation. I was being judged as a mother, and I knew exactly who the anonymous accuser was. They asked to speak with Lily, alone. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, watching my daughter walk into the living room with these 2 strangers while I was told to wait in the kitchen. I could hear the low murmur of their voices, Lily's sweet, high-pitched replies. I prayed she wouldn't mention Eleanor's secrets or the locket, things that could be twisted into evidence of my own parental alienation. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged. The woman's face was unreadable. "Your daughter seems well cared for, Ms. Gable," she said. "Your home is clean, but the report mentioned financial and emotional instability. We'll have to open a file and schedule a follow-up home visit. We may also require you to undergo a psychological evaluation." A file. An evaluation. Eleanor's attack was brilliant in its cruelty. She was using the mechanisms of the state, the very systems designed to protect children, as her personal weapons. She would bog me down in a bureaucratic nightmare, bleed me dry with legal and medical fees I couldn't afford, and build a paper trail that painted me as an unfit mother. The stress alone could be enough to make me crack, which would only prove her right. After they left, I collapsed onto a chair, shaking with rage and fear. This was how she was going to do it. Not by snatching Lily in the night, but by methodically and legally dismantling my life until I had nothing left to fight with. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. My carefully laid plan to wait for her to cross a bigger line was no longer viable. She was already burning my world down around me. I had to act now. I picked up the phone and called the only person I could think of who might be able to help. A man I hadn't spoken to in over a year, Mark's old college roommate, David. He was a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense corporate attorney in the city. He wasn't a family lawyer, but he was smart. And more importantly, he had known and loved Mark. He would know that I would never, ever do anything to harm my daughter. I explained the situation, my voice trembling as I recounted the story of the mortgage, the escalating intrusions, the CPS visit, and finally the recording. He listened in complete silence. When I was finished, the only sound was his slow, steady breathing. "Sarah," he said finally, his voice grim. "This is worse than you think. This isn't just a custody dispute. This is stalking. This is harassment. This woman is unhinged. Don't talk to her again. Don't let her in your house. I'm clearing my schedule. I'll be there tomorrow morning. We're going to the police." His calm authority was a lifeline in the churning chaos of my fear. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. The war had begun, but now I finally had an ally. David arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, his presence filling my small house with an aura of calm competence that I desperately needed. He wasn't just Mark's old friend, he was a shield. He listened to the audio recording, his expression growing darker with every word Eleanor spoke. When it was over, he simply nodded. "This is premeditated," he said, his voice hard. "She's been planning this for a long time. The mortgage was the opening salvo." He laid out a strategy that was both aggressive and meticulous. We wouldn't just be defending against her attacks, we would be launching our own. The first step was to file for a restraining order. The recording of her threat, "You have just started a war you cannot possibly win," coupled with the CPS call, constituted a clear pattern of harassment. Second, we would proactively engage with CPS. David would represent me, providing them with the full context of the situation, including the financial manipulation and the recording. We would frame Eleanor not as a concerned relative, but as a potential threat to Lily's well-being. "We have to control the narrative," David explained. "Right now, she's defined you as a victim. We are going to redefine her as a predator." The words sent a shiver down my spine, but they also ignited a spark of righteous anger. He was right. I had been so focused on enduring, on surviving, that I hadn't thought about fighting back on my own terms. That afternoon, we went to the local police station. I felt a profound sense of shame walking in, as if I were airing my family's dirty laundry in the most public way possible. But David's steady presence beside me gave me strength. We met with a detective, a woman named Miller, who had a tired but intelligent face. At first, I could see the skepticism in her eyes. It was a messy domestic affair, the kind of thing they saw all the time. Then David played the recording. As Eleanor's calm, chilling voice filled the small interview room, Detective Miller's posture changed. She leaned forward, her expression hardening. She listened to the entire 20-minute conversation, from my feigned confession of weakness to Eleanor's final venomous threat. When it was over, she looked at me, and the skepticism was gone, replaced by a grim understanding. "She paid off your house?" Miller asked, just to confirm. I nodded. "And then she called CPS on you the day after you refused to give her your child?" "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Miller wrote in her notebook for a long moment. "Okay," she said finally. "We have enough for a temporary restraining order. based on the threat and the vexatious report to a government agency. I'll get the paperwork started. You'll have a court date in a week or two to make it permanent. Until she's served, do not engage with her. If she comes to your house, do not open the door. Call 911 immediately. Leaving the station with a copy of the report felt like taking my first breath of clean air after months of suffocation. It was a piece of paper, but it was also a shield. It was the state acknowledging that my fear was real, that the threat was credible. The next few days were a blur of legal paperwork and anxious waiting. David was a whirlwind of efficiency, filing motions, contacting the CPS caseworker to provide our side of the story, and preparing me for the upcoming court hearing. The temporary order was served to Eleanor by a sheriff's deputy at her home 2 hours away. I couldn't imagine her reaction, the shock, the fury, the narcissistic injury of being so publicly rebuffed. Her campaign of quiet psychological warfare had been dragged into the harsh, unflattering light of the legal system. Her response was predictable. Her lawyer, a slick, expensive-looking man, filed a motion to dismiss the restraining order, claiming it was a frivolous and hysterical reaction from a grieving and unstable woman who was trying to extort more money from his client, a charitable and concerned great-aunt. The lies were so brazen they were almost breathtaking. She was twisting her own act of financial entrapment into a story of my greed. On the day of the hearing, my stomach was in knots. Eleanor was already there when we arrived, sitting on the opposite side of the courtroom. She looked impeccable, dressed in a soft gray suit, her expression one of pained, noble sorrow. She was performing for the judge, playing the role of the benevolent matriarch, wronged by an ungrateful and troubled relative. When she saw me, her eyes filled with a look of such profound disappointment and pity that for a terrifying second I almost doubted myself. Her lawyer's opening statement was a masterpiece of character assassination. He painted a picture of me as a manipulative, struggling single mother who had happily accepted a life-altering financial gift and then turned on her benefactor when her subsequent, well-meaning offers of help were perceived as control. He portrayed Eleanor as a lonely widow who simply wanted to be a part of her beloved grandniece's life. David sat calmly through the entire speech, making occasional notes. When it was his turn, he didn't start with insults or accusations. He started with the facts. "Your Honor," he began, his voice clear and steady, "this is not a case about a family squabble. It is a case about a calculated, systematic campaign of harassment and psychological abuse predicated on a single, insidious belief that a $500,000 gift buys you the right to someone else's child." He then laid out the timeline, step by step. The mortgage payment, the escalating intrusions, the attempts to undermine my parental authority, the anonymous call to CPS. And then he brought out the recording. "We have evidence, Your Honor, that Ms. Albright explicitly demanded that my client surrender her child. And when that demand was refused, she explicitly threatened a war of attrition. With the court's permission, I'd like to play that evidence now." Eleanor's lawyer jumped to his feet, objecting furiously. "This is an illegal recording. It's inadmissible." "In our state, Your Honor," David countered smoothly, "we are a one-party consent state. My client was a party to the conversation and consented to its recording. It is perfectly legal and highly relevant." The judge, a stern-faced woman who looked like she had seen everything, peered down from the bench. "I'll allow it." The courtroom fell silent. David pressed a button on a small digital player, and Eleanor's voice, calm, confident, and utterly damning, filled the room. "Let me take her. Let me be her mother. I can give her everything, everything you can't. It's the only logical solution." I watched Eleanor's face. As her own words echoed through the courtroom, the mask of sorrowful benevolence began to crumble. A flicker of panic appeared in her eyes. The color drained from her face. The recording continued, playing her reaction to my refusal. "You have just started a war you cannot possibly win. I will do whatever it takes to save her from you." When it finished, the silence was absolute. The judge looked from the audio player to Eleanor, her expression unreadable. Eleanor, for the first time since I had known her, looked small and exposed. Her carefully constructed reality had been shattered by her own words. The judge cleared her throat. "Ms. Albright," she said, her voice laced with ice, "do you have anything to say in response to what I've just heard?" Eleanor stood up, her composure gone, replaced by a desperate, flustered rage. "She tricked me. She's twisting my words. I was only trying to help. I love that child. She's incompetent, a child raising a child. I paid for that house. That house is mine. That child should be mine." She was unraveling the raw, possessive obsession she had hidden for so long, bursting into the open for everyone to see. Her lawyer tried to silence her, but it was too late. She had confessed, right there in open court. The judge banged her gavel. "That's enough." The judge's voice cut through Eleanor's frantic tirade like a surgeon's scalpel. "Ms. Albright, please sit down." The order was quiet, but carried an undeniable weight of authority. Eleanor stared, her mouth still half open, her face a mask of disbelief. Her lawyer gently but firmly pulled her back into her seat. She collapsed into it, all the fight seeming to drain out of her at once. The judge looked at me, then at David, then back at the sputtering woman across the courtroom. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose, a long, weary sigh escaping her lips. The theatricality of the courtroom fell away, and for a moment she just looked like a woman who was tired of seeing the terrible things people could do to one another. "The request for a permanent restraining order is granted," she said, her voice ringing with finality. "Eleanor Albright is to have no contact, direct or indirect, with Sarah Gable or the minor child, Lily Gable. She is to remain at least 500 yards away from their persons, their residence, their school, and Ms. Gable's place of employment. This order is effective for a period of 5 years. 5 years, it felt like a lifetime. It felt like freedom." The judge wasn't finished. She turned her steely gaze back to Eleanor. "Furthermore, given the evidence presented today, specifically the audio recording and your own outburst, I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal investigation into harassment and attempted custodial interference. And as for your claim on the house, Ms. Albright, the law is quite clear. A gift once given cannot be taken back. You have no legal claim to that property. Any further attempts to assert such a claim will be viewed as a violation of this order." Eleanor just sat there, stunned into silence. Her entire world, her entire meticulously planned campaign, had been dismantled in less than an hour. The law, which she had intended to use as her most powerful weapon, had been turned against her with devastating force. As the gavel struck, officially ending the hearing, a wave of relief so powerful it made my knees weak washed over me. I gripped David's arm, my knuckles white. He gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "It's over, Sarah," he whispered. "She can't touch you." We left the courtroom without looking back. I didn't want to see her face. I didn't want to see her defeat. I just wanted to go home to my daughter. The aftermath was both messy and liberating. The local news picked up the story, a small but salacious piece about a wealthy socialite, a paid-off mortgage, and a restraining order involving her grandniece. Eleanor's carefully cultivated image of charitable elegance was shattered overnight. She became a local pariah, a cautionary tale whispered about at charity luncheons and country clubs. The criminal investigation David had hoped for fizzled out. The DA felt the restraining order was sufficient, and that a criminal case would be difficult to prove. I was disappointed, but David reminded me that we had achieved our primary goal. She was legally out of our lives. The CPS case was dropped within a week of the hearing, the caseworker sending me a letter of apology for the distress the investigation had caused. But the scars remained. For months, Lily would ask when Grandma Elle was coming to visit again. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that the woman who showered her with gifts and affection was a danger? I settled on a watered-down, age-appropriate version of the truth. "Grandma Elle is unwell, sweetie," I told her. "She needs to get better, and so she can't visit for a while." It was an inadequate explanation for a monstrous betrayal, but it was the best I could do. The biggest question was the house. It was ours, free and clear, a tangible symbol of our victory. But it was also tainted. Every room held a memory of Eleanor's presence, of her insidious campaign to erase me. The rose bushes she had, planted in the garden, felt like a monument to her possessiveness. The dollhouse she'd bought for Lily, which still dominated the living room, felt like a Trojan horse, a gift that had concealed a terrible intent. I looked at the walls, the foundation, the roof, and I no longer saw a home. I saw the price of a transaction I had never agreed to. I saw the cage she had built for us. About 6 months after the hearing, I made a decision. I put the house on the market. David thought I was crazy. "It's your biggest asset, Sarah. It's security." "No," I told him, the certainty in my voice surprising even myself. "Security isn't a building, it's peace of mind, and I will never have any peace in this house." The house sold quickly in the strong market. The proceeds, after taxes, were a significant sum of money. Not enough to never work again, but enough to provide a real cushion, a genuine sense of security that had nothing to do with Eleanor Albright. I used a portion of it to buy a small, cozy condominium on the other side of town, a place with no history, no ghosts. It was smaller than the house, with no garden for rose bushes, but it was ours. Truly, unconditionally ours. The rest of the money I put into a trust fund for Lily's education, an investment in her future made by me, her mother, free of any strings or sinister motives. We built a new life in that small condo, a quiet, simple life. I continued working at the library. Lily started first grade at the local public school, and we filled our weekends with trips to the park and the public pool, places Eleanor had deemed unworthy. We were happy. It was a fragile happiness at first, haunted by the shadow of what had happened. But with each passing month, it grew stronger, more resilient. I learned to trust again, slowly. I learned that true generosity doesn't come with an invoice. and that real family doesn't demand payment. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about Eleanor. I wondered if she ever felt remorse, or if she simply saw herself as the victim, a benevolent woman punished for loving too much. I suspected it was the latter. Her kind of obsession doesn't just fade away. It just finds a new object, a new cause. But she was no longer my problem. She was a ghost, a memory. The restraining order was a wall between her world and mine. And with every day that passed, that wall grew higher and more solid. The greatest victory wasn't in the courtroom. It wasn't in the money from the house. It was in the small, everyday moments. It was in Lily's laughter as I pushed her on a swing. It was in the quiet evenings we spent reading side by side on our new sofa. It was in the fierce, unwavering certainty that I was her mother, and that was more than enough. The stranger who paid my mortgage had demanded my child, and in the end, she had lost everything. And I, in fighting her, had found a strength I never knew I possessed. I had learned that a home is not built with wood and nails, but with love and fierce, unyielding protection. And that kind of home can never be bought or sold. The years that followed were blessedly quiet, a long, calm exhale after a lifetime of holding my breath. The 5-year restraining order expired, but we never heard from Eleanor again. It was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. Occasionally, I would indulge a morbid curiosity and search for her name online. I found her husband Walter's obituary from many years prior, and eventually her own. She had passed away 3 years after the court hearing, alone in that large, silent house of hers. The cause of death was listed as a heart attack. There was no mention of family, only a request for donations to an animal shelter. I felt a strange, hollow pity for her. She had been so desperate to build a family, so desperate for a legacy, that she had destroyed any chance of having one. Her obsession had consumed her, leaving nothing behind but a cautionary tale and a paid-off mortgage on a house I no longer owned. Lily grew into a bright, compassionate young woman, seemingly unscathed by the bizarre trauma of her early childhood. We talked about it eventually when she was old enough to understand. I told her the truth, softening the edges but not hiding the essential facts. She listened with a solemn maturity that was far beyond her years. "She must have been very sad and lonely," was her only comment, a simple, profound observation that captured the tragedy of Eleanor's life more effectively than any adult judgment could. That simple empathy was proof that Eleanor's poison had never taken root. Lily had my heart, not hers. The money from the sale of the house did exactly what I had intended. It grew, carefully invested, and when the time came, it paid for Lily's college education. Watching her walk across the stage to receive her diploma, I felt a sense of victory so complete, it almost brought me to my knees. It was the ultimate refutation of Eleanor's claims. My daughter had not been condemned to a life of mediocrity. She had thrived, not because of some grand inheritance or private school pedigree, but because she was loved, supported, and allowed to be herself. The security Eleanor had tried to weaponize had become, in the end, a tool of our own making, repurposed for a future free of her influence. I never remarried. My life was full with my daughter, my friends, and my work at the library, where I eventually became the head librarian. The library was my sanctuary, a place of order and quiet knowledge, the antithesis of the chaos Eleanor had brought into our lives. It was there that I learned the true meaning of community, of people helping each other, not out of a desire for ownership, but out of simple, shared humanity. Sometimes a young mother would come in, her face etched with the familiar lines of financial worry and exhaustion, and I would see a reflection of my younger self. I would make a point of being extra kind, of helping her find the right books for her child, of telling her about the free storytime programs. It was a small gesture, but it felt important. It felt like paying forward a debt, not of money, but of compassion. The experience with Eleanor changed me in fundamental ways. It stripped away my naivety, my belief in the inherent goodness of family ties. It taught me that monsters don't always have fangs and claws. Sometimes they wear tasteful beige suits and offer you the world on a silver platter. But it also taught me about my own resilience. I had been a mouse, terrified and hiding in the walls of my own life. But when my child was threatened, I had found the heart of a lion. That strength never left me. It became the bedrock of my identity, a quiet, unshakable confidence that I could face whatever life threw at me. Years later, when Lily was in medical school, she called me one night, her voice full of excitement. "Mom, you'll never guess what. I was looking for a new apartment online, just browsing, and I saw a listing for our old house." My breath caught in my throat. "Oh? Yeah," she said, her voice a little softer now. "It looks different family, different furniture. But the rose bushes are still there. They're huge now. The picture shows them in full bloom." The rose bushes, Eleanor's roses. For a moment, the old chill returned, a phantom limb of a fear long since amputated. But then it passed. They weren't Eleanor's roses anymore. They were just flowers, beautiful and ephemeral, reaching for the sun. They were part of a story that was no longer ours. "That's nice, sweetie," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. The house was just a house. The roses were just roses. They had no power over us anymore. We had built our own garden in our own small safe place, and it was more than enough. The stranger who paid my mortgage did, in a twisted way, give me a gift. Not the house, not the money, but the profound, unshakable knowledge of what truly matters. It's not the walls that surround you, but the love that holds you up. It's not the wealth you possess, but the strength you find when you have nothing left to lose. She tried to buy my child, but in the end, the only thing she purchased was her own desolate solitude. And I was left with everything. Looking back now from the quiet vantage point of a life rebuilt, the edges of the story have softened. The raw, visceral fear has faded into a scar, a reminder of a battle fought and won. It no longer defines me, but it is a part of the tapestry of who I am. It is the dark thread that makes the brighter ones stand out in sharper relief. My relationship with Lily is the sun around which my world orbits. It is a bond forged not just in love, but in fire. We survived something together, a silent, creeping war that took place behind the closed doors of a picture-perfect suburban home. That shared history gives our connection a depth that I see other mothers and daughters search for. We don't take each other for granted. We know how easily things can be broken, how quickly a life can be upended by the quiet machinations of a damaged soul. I often wonder about the nature of evil. Was Eleanor evil, or was she just a woman hollowed out by a grief so profound that it warped her entire being? I've come to believe that it doesn't really matter. The distinction between malice and madness is a question for philosophers. For me, for Lily, she was a danger. Her motives were irrelevant in the face of her actions. To protect my child, I had to treat her as a threat, regardless of the pain that fueled her. It was the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes empathy for your aggressor is a luxury you cannot afford. You must save yourself first. You must save your children first. The house itself became a local legend for a while, the murder house without a murder. People in town knew a sanitized version of the story. They knew there was a nasty family dispute, a restraining order. They didn't know the chilling details, the recorded confession, the sheer audacious scope of Eleanor's plan. And that was fine with me. Our story wasn't for public consumption. It was a private war, and we had earned a private peace. David remained a steadfast friend throughout the years. He became a sort of uncle to Lily, attending her graduations and celebrating her successes. He was the family we chose, a reminder that the bonds of loyalty and love are not always written in blood. One Christmas, years after Eleanor was gone, he gave me a small framed photograph. It was of him and Mark in college, young and grinning, full of a future that Mark would never get to see. "He would have been so proud of you, Sarah," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "The way you protected her, it was incredible." I held the frame, my fingers tracing the outline of my late husband's smiling face. For so long my fight had been fueled by a desperate, protective love for my daughter. But in that moment, I realized it had also been fueled by my love for him. I was protecting his legacy. I was ensuring that his child, the best part of him left on this earth, would grow up safe and whole. Eleanor had tried to claim that legacy as her own, to possess it, to control it. But she had failed to understand that Mark's legacy wasn't something that could be owned. It was something to be nurtured. It was his daughter's laughter, her kindness, her intelligence. It was the good person she was becoming. That was his monument. Not a house, not a name carved in stone, but a living, breathing, thriving human being. As I enter the later chapters of my own life, I find myself filled not with bitterness, but with a profound sense of gratitude. I am grateful for my strength, for my daughter, for the quiet, unassuming life we have built from the ashes of a battle we never should have had to fight. The world is full of people, like Eleanor, people with gaping holes in their hearts who believe they can fill them by taking pieces from others. They see a life, a child, a happiness, and they want to possess it, to own it. They come bearing gifts, their hands outstretched, but their gifts are cages. What I learned, what I would tell any woman who finds herself in the shadow of such a person, is this: your life is not a commodity. Your children are not property. Your home is not the four walls around you, but the sanctuary you build within yourself. Trust your instincts. That small, quiet voice that tells you something is wrong is the truest compass you will ever have. Do not be afraid to be a lion. Do not be afraid to fight. And never, ever believe that a debt of gratitude requires you to surrender your soul. The stranger who paid my mortgage is long gone, a footnote in the story of my life, but the lessons she taught me remain. She taught me the price of things, and more importantly, she taught me what is priceless. And for that, in the strangest of ways, I am grateful. Our little condo is filled with pictures of Lily, from a gap-toothed first grader to a confident young doctor in her white coat. It is a home built not on a grand financial gesture, but on a foundation of love, resilience, and the hard-won peace that comes from surviving the storm and learning to dance in the rain that follows. It is more than enough. It is everything